Hey guys, welcome back to John's Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm John, and as always, thank you guys for being here. I hope you guys won your matchups in Week 4. We are already on to Week 5 of the NFL season, and I can't believe it. It's flying by. I don't know if it's the same way for you guys, but we're already a quarter of the way through the season, which is crazy, but I hope you guys are doing well so far. Hopefully, you're 3-1. If not, maybe you're 2-2. Some people might be 4-0, but that's tough at this point with all the craziness that's been going on in the NFL. But hopefully, you guys are 3-1. But if you guys are here, thank you for being here. Go smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss one of my videos giving you guys fantasy advice. And also check out our During Debate podcast that we also post every Thursday. It's me and the other 3 guys talking about football, not fantasy football, just football in general. But if you're looking for fantasy advice, definitely subscribe so that you get these videos every Saturday. And I could help you win your matchup, because if you guys join my live on Sunday and you're looking for a little bit more detailed or some kind of different season-long advice, definitely check out these videos. And I'm super excited for this video because I'm going to start off giving advice on the London game like I did last week. And I'm going to give you guys some advice on starts and sits. And then I'm going to get into what you should do with some players that are supposed to be performing but aren't. And I'm super excited for that segment. Guys like Jonathan Taylor, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, George Kittle, all these guys that haven't really been performing, and you're questioning, what should I do with them? Or maybe there's some guys that I'm going to mention. I'm going to mention like 15 guys. Maybe you need to know what you should do with them, whether you should keep them or trade them, and who you should trade them for, or if you don't have them on your team, if you should get them on your team. So I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes as well. But I'm going to start with the London game. It's the Giants and the Packers. It's probably not going to be as good of a game as last week. The Vikings and the Saints was a great game. Came down to a double doink by Will Lutz on a 61-yard field goal, which was super fun to watch. And I was still watching it live with you guys on my live stream on TikTok. So that was a lot of fun. But this game, I think it's going to be low scoring. I'd be surprised if either team hit 25. I'd be surprised if the Giants even hit 20. I do think the Packers will probably win this game. But in terms of fantasy, there's only one guy from the Giants that you're starting. It's Saquon. And if you have him, you're definitely starting him. He had 31 carries last week. And if you have any Packers players, the only guys I'm really considering starting are Aaron Jones. I would probably start him. And then the other 2 that are maybes are Lazard and Rodgers. I mean, Lazard had 6 catches for 116 yards last week. He did have a decent week. That's 17.6 points. Rodgers, on the other hand, did have a decent week as well, but neither of them have really hit their ceiling consistently. They're getting their floor, but it's tough to trust them with the high upside. And in terms of this slate of games that are happening tomorrow on Sunday, I think there's actually going to be a lot of high-scoring games. So I think if you have Rodgers or Lazard, I would trend towards not starting them unless you really have to. I mean, if you have some other options, you might want to take those other options, because I think the games tomorrow will be higher scoring, and I think they'll have a better chance. Those players will have a better chance to go off rather than Rodgers or Lazard. I'd be surprised if Lazard or Rodgers really killed their expectation this week. And in terms of sits, I would sit A.J. Dillon, because I don't think this offense is going to get a big lead on the Giants enough to run the ball a lot with Dillon. And the Giants are usually keep games close and low scoring, and their run defense has actually been pretty good. And then I would also sit Romeo Dobbs. I mean, he was integrated a lot into the offense 2 weeks ago. Last week, he did get a few catches, got around his projection, but this week in a lower scoring game, he has less of a chance to score a touchdown. So I'd trend towards sitting him. And then Daniel Jones did have 2 rushing touchdowns and over 60 rushing yards last week, but under 100 passing yards. So I would probably not start Daniel Jones, and any of the pass catchers for the Giants, I wouldn't start any of them, even tight end. Nobody I would start for the Giants other than Barkley. So that's the advice on the London game. Now I'm going to get into something I'm super excited for. I'm going to be talking about the players that you guys have on your fantasy teams that you are worried about and what you should do with them. Whether you have them and you should keep them, whether you have them and you should trade them, or whether you have them and you should just drop them. I don't know. Like, what do you do at this point, because they are just not performing after 4 weeks? And I'm going to start off with likely the number 1 pick in your fantasy football draft, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, the Colts haven't looked good at all. I mean, if anybody watched the game the other night on Thursday, that was one of the worst games that I've watched in a long time. I mean, it ended 12-9. The Colts somehow won the game. Russ looks like crap, to be honest with you, and the Colts don't look much better either, and Nyheim Hines got knocked out of the game on the 3rd play. I mean, Jonathan Taylor did have a pretty good week 1, but now he has that high ankle sprain, and I'm actually pretty concerned about him. So if you want my advice, I would trade him. If you have Jonathan Taylor, I think it's time to panic. I think you should trade him off of your fantasy team. And I'm going to give you a potential trade that you can offer in your league, or some guys that you could go and get instead of having Jonathan Taylor. And the reason I'm worried about Taylor is because of that high ankle sprain, number one. And number two, this offense does just not look as good with Matt Ryan at quarterback. The offensive line, for some reason, is not doing well. And Matt Ryan, every time he gets sacked, it seems like he fumbles the ball. Sometimes gets it back. Sometimes the defense gets it. So I'm worried about them moving the ball down the field and Taylor being able to get as many touchdowns as he did last season, because if the offense isn't moving the ball down the field, he's not going to get more goal line opportunities. Plus, that high ankle sprain, that tends to linger. Players who have high ankle sprains, it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks for it to heal, and that's if you don't play on it, and it seems like he's trying to practice and play on it. I'm worried about his production throughout the rest of the season. So if you have Jonathan Taylor, I would trade him away. And one trade package you could try to get is Deebo Samuel and Dameon Pierce. I tell you guys for the third straight podcast to go get Dameon Pierce, and it turned out that he was one of my weekly picks last week, had over 25 fantasy points. So try to get him on your team. If you could give up Taylor and get Deebo and get Dameon Pierce, two guys that are ascending in fantasy football, I would do that. Or if you can get a guy like Mixon and maybe a guy like Chris Godwin, I would do that for Jonathan Taylor. Or maybe you can get Eckler and Terry McLaurin, something like that. I would do that as well, because I'm worried about Taylor going forward. The second guy I'm going to talk about is Keenan Allen. He played week 1, got hurt. He really hasn't returned with that hamstring injury. He hasn't even practiced, which is really concerning. My guess is that Keenan Allen, he's going to miss this week. I think he's going to miss next week. He might even miss the week after. But if you have him on your fantasy team, I would keep him. And the reason is because you probably won't be able to get much. You probably won't be able to get much for him because his trade value is so low. Everybody's worried about his hamstring injury. They don't really know how this Chargers offense is going to look with him there, because they haven't even seen him with him there since week 1 in the first half of the game. So if you have Keenan Allen, hold off a little bit longer. I know it's tough because he probably is your wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 at the worst. So hold on to him. I have him in 2 leagues. I'm just holding him on my bench. So hold on to him. If you don't have Keenan Allen and you want to go try to get him, I would be fine with that. A guy you could give up for Keenan Allen is Curtis Samuel. He's been good throughout the first few weeks of the season. Dotson actually is ruled out for this game, so I think Samuel's going to have even more targets. He is integrated into this offense pretty well. They're running plays for him, giving him handoffs out of the backfield, but I think Terry McLaurin is also there. I mean, Logan Thomas is now back. I think he might not play this week, but Dotson's also there. And then you have Brian Robinson, Gibson, and McKissick out of the backfield. Plus, this offense isn't very great to begin with. Plus, the defense is horrible, so the opposing offense is on the field for longer. So Curtis Samuel, I don't like as much. I'd rather trade for Keenan Allen, and you could do that right now. You don't have to wait for Keenan Allen to come back. Do that right now, and then keep Allen on your bench while you could still get Allen. It's a good trade for you. A third guy I want to talk about, probably drafted within your top 8 in your fantasy league, is Jamar Chase. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say something that people might give me backlash for, but I agree. I think I'm going to take a chance and say you guys should trade away Jamar Chase. I think it's time to panic on Jamar Chase. T. Higgins is consistently getting a higher target share than Jamar Chase. Not only that, but he has tremendously hard matchups late in the season. And I know you guys probably don't want to think about the fantasy playoffs yet, but if your team is set up for a good season and you think you're going to make the fantasy playoffs, it's never too early to look at the fantasy playoff schedules. And Jamar Chase plays New England and Buffalo in those fantasy football playoffs in the semifinals and finals, which is really tough matchups. We know the Patriots, their defense hasn't been great this season, but they like to take away the best option for Burrow. And who is that? That's Chase and Higgins. So Belichick's going to game plan to take them away and let Mixon, if anything, beat them, not Chase and Higgins. And then against Buffalo has great cornerbacks, and their defense is overall really good. So I think that's going to be a lower scoring game. I'm worried about Chase long term, and I'm worried about Chase because Higgins is actually getting a higher target share. So if you're wondering what you should do, I would do something like giving up Chase, and maybe you can get Deebo, and maybe you could get Dameon Pierce along with that. And I would love to do that trade because Deebo's trending up. Deebo has great fantasy playoff matchups. Plus, Dameon Pierce is a solid RB2 for the rest of the season. We saw him break out last week. This week against the Jaguars, I think he's going to have another 15-point fantasy game, and he's only getting better. And Chase, He really hasn't popped off yet. But the one thing I do want to say about Chase before I move on to the next player is I would wait until after this week to trade Chase. Don't trade him before tomorrow because they're playing the Ravens. The Ravens have horrible cornerbacks, and last year when the Ravens played the Bengals put up 41 points in both games. So keep Chase for tomorrow night's game, and then hopefully he has a really good game and you could trade him away and get good value for him like Debo and Pierce. Another guy I want to talk about is Naji Harris. Now with Kenny Pickett at quarterback, I mean, every fantasy running back that has a rookie quarterback, their numbers are just not that good. And I was already not high on Naji Harris coming in, and now I'm really not high on Naji. I would try to trade him away as soon as you possibly can. I would try to trade him for Kamara. If you could do that before tomorrow's game, I think Kamara is going to play better than Naji, and I think Kamara is going to have a better rest of the season than Naji. If you don't want to get Kamara, maybe you could get somebody like Dameon Pierce or Breece Hall, and maybe you can also get Terry McLaurin or Brandon Cooks with that. Maybe you can get, if you can get Dameon Pierce and Terry McLaurin, or if you can get Breece Hall and Brandon Cooks for Naji, I would do that right now because I'm worried about Naji with that quarterback, new quarterback, and all the teams are going to stack the box against him. The next two guys I want to talk about are tight ends, Kyle Pitts and George Kittle. It was funny. On one of the videos I posted on TikTok earlier this week, somebody they commented on the video and said, what should I do with the 49ers new left guard, George Kittle? And I commented and I said, maybe you could try the new right guard for the Falcons, Kyle Pitts. So there's a lot of memes going around about these two guys. They really haven't been performing. I mean, Kittle's basically not even used in this offense, and same with Pitts. I mean, Mariota's not even looking at him, and Pitts is not even playing this week. He was just ruled out for the game, so he's not playing tomorrow against the Bucs. If you have these guys, I would try to trade them away as soon as you can. I mean, you can't drop them, but maybe try to trade them to somebody else who really believes in their upside the rest of the season, because I really don't. I don't think they're going to be used that much in their respective offenses. If you can get a guy like Dalton Schultz and Breece Hall, maybe trade away Pitts for Schultz and Hall, or trade away Kittle for Schultz and Hall. And I know Schultz, he hasn't been doing great either, 0 points last week, but I think with Dak coming back next week, not this week against the Rams, but next week maybe against the Eagles, I like Schultz for the rest of the season. He finished as the number 3 tight end last season, so I think Schultz's upside is a lot better than Pitts and Kittle the rest of the year. But you may be able to get Breece Hall along with Schultz because of the fact that Kittle and Pitts have big names and they were drafted higher than Schultz. So I would do something like that. Another guy I want to talk about is J.K. Dobbins. He came back last week. We didn't think he was going to get that much work, but he ended up with 2 touchdowns. I mean, they were by the goal line, so we can't take too much away from that, but I do think Dobbins is going to be good the rest of the year. Honestly, I would give up to get Dobbins. If you have him, keep him. If you don't have him and you want to try to get him, I'd be fine with that. Maybe give up a guy like Gibson, Antonio Gibson, with Brian Robinson coming back. Gibson's a good guy to trade away right now. And even if you have to add like a bench guy with Gibson, I would do that and try to get, J.K. Dobbins. If you have to give up Gibson and maybe like an Elijah Moore or Corey Davis, somebody in that realm, I would do that for J.K. Dobbins. The next two guys I want to talk about are 2 running backs probably drafted within the first 15 of your fantasy football draft. Haven't been great. Alvin Kamara, 7 points in one game, 7 points in the other. The other games he hasn't even played. Dalvin Cook hasn't popped off yet. Those guys I would keep for right now. I think they're both going to have pretty decent games. Honestly, I think they're both going to have their best game of the season tomorrow. So I would keep them if you have them. If you don't have them, I wouldn't trade for them yet. Wait until they play this week to see how they do. But if you have them, I would keep them. They still have some upside, and hopefully they get used more. A.J. Dillon is the next guy I want to talk about. A lot of people are talking about him, and I've seen a lot of analysts out there saying, oh my gosh, A.J. Dillon's stock is so low. Go get him right now. Buy him low right now. I completely disagree. I think if you have Dillon, you should trade him away right now. And the reason is because this Packers offense isn't as good as we thought. We thought they would be better. We thought they would get more of leads so that they could use A.J. Dillon and pound the rock. It seems like this offensive line, even though Bakhtiari is back, it seems like this offensive line isn't getting the push that they want. Dillon isn't being used as much as we thought he was going to be used. Aaron Jones is being used a lot more. So if you have Dillon, I would trade him away right now. And honestly, somebody you can get, maybe you can get Dobbins. Maybe you can get Dameon Pierce. I would be fine with those trades. The next 2 guys I want to talk about are 2 receivers for the 2 teams that played on Thursday night. I mean, that game was atrocious, but Sutton and Pittman. What should you do with them? And honestly, I think you should keep both of them for right now. Pittman and Sutton, I mean, a lot of people are probably worried about them because their offenses are horrible. I mean, they both didn't have their starting running back, which hinders their ability to score touchdowns because they can't move the ball down the field. But I think Pittman is going to be used a lot more. Jonathan Taylor coming back. Pittman, they're going to have to use Pittman. They're going to have to throw the ball. Pierce did have a pretty good game, so that worries me a little bit. But, I mean, with these two guys, you could test the market, see what you can get. But for right now, I would probably keep Pittman, and I would probably keep Sutton because they're going to have to get targeted a lot with those starting running backs out. Maybe they might not be able to get the touchdowns because the offense might not be able to move the ball down the field. But in terms of yards and catches, I would probably keep them. They have a pretty decent floor with the amount of targets they want to get. But as I always say, nobody's untradeable, even the best of the best. Even Saquon Barkley, who's the number one running back right now, he's not untradeable. So keep your eyes and ears open for trade offers. But those guys I would probably keep for now. But if an offer came by that I really liked, then I would probably do it. The last guy I want to talk about is Deontay Johnson with Kenny Pickett coming in at quarterback. You guys might be worried about the pass catchers for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Deontay Johnson, I'm actually not really worried about. He's basically had over 10 targets in every single game so far, so he's going to get the volume. I'm worried about him this week, so it's going to be tough for you to deal with him this week. I would probably not start him this week against the Bills, but I would probably keep Deontay Johnson unless you can get a guy like DeAndre Hopkins who's coming back from suspension in 2 weeks. Maybe you can get Chris Godwin. Maybe you can get Keenan Allen who hasn't come back yet. And Chris Godwin, like I said, he's still coming back from that hamstring and knee injury, but I think he's going to have a great season. Brady's going to have to throw it to Evans and Godwin the whole year. Or you can get a guy like Michael Thomas who is not going to play this week, might be out for another week after this, but if you can give up Deontay Johnson right now for a guy like those four players, I think the upside is worth it. And if you're worried about Pickens, I really wouldn't be worried because if you have Pickens, you probably didn't even do much for him. Maybe you just picked him up this week or maybe you drafted him late. So I like the upside of Pickens. And then Freiermuth, I would also keep because he's been solid at tight end, basically 10 points or more in every game so far. So I like Freiermuth as an every week starter. He's pretty solid. So I still like them. But those are the players that I think you should do something with. I mean, a lot of you guys have been asking me and other analysts, what should you do with these players? So I just mentioned 15 guys. So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of what I think of these players going forward. So hopefully you guys can make moves before this weekend, maybe before tomorrow, or maybe after tomorrow. But good luck with your fantasy matchups this week. I hope you guys win. And as always, if you guys have questions for me, head over to the Patreon. The link is in the bio, in the Instagram, and the TikTok. I love answering your guys' questions and setting up phone calls with you guys. So if you guys have any specific questions about setting your lineup, winning your matchup, or improving your team and making trades based on what your team needs are, definitely head over to the Patreon, click that link in our bio, and head over there so I can help you out. And I love talking to you guys, so I appreciate all your support. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for your support on TikTok, and I'll see you guys tomorrow during my live show on TikTok.